we didn't get it that much. But now you get it on all the... I glance into an arcade sometimes, and all the guys are playing them there, punching in loonies, and well, the quarters now are not enough money. The loonies are used now. And every goddamn one is bang, bang, kill, kill. And I keep laughing to myself. I say, Jesus Christ, in this modern world, the guys are banging at each other, zap, 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 and they never drop dead. They're always missing. Well, that's impossible. If I said to you, would you stand up there half a mile away and let me take one shot at you with a 22 rifle, which is the smallest bullet you can get in a rifle? Would you stand a half mile up there and let me shoot at you once for $1,000? You'd say, do you think I'm crazy? Well, I joined the army to let the whole I joined the Canadian Army to let the whole German army do the same thing to me. But when I joined, I didn't think I was ever even going to see the war, because I thought it'd be all over by the time I even got to England. And so did everybody else. People like my father, they didn't cry when you were boarding the train to go to the ship to go to England. You know, the war will be over in a week or two, but at least you'll get a nice trip out of it. And any time during that 6 years, when you have 6 years of overseas, you'll then be eligible for leave to Canada. There was no such thing. It just so happened they said, well, now the war is over, you'll get a leave to Canada. But even then, it was difficult, and I had to pull some strings to get my leave, even though I was eligible, because there was 1 million Americans alone that had to be transported back to the States. And when I came back on the Queen Elizabeth, we didn't have meals. We were given 4K rations, that's, 4K, day rations. And we went, and there were 20,000 Americans on the ship. They were sleeping on top of the kitchen stove, they were sleeping in the kitchen floor, and you all, when you boarded the ship, you got a tag with a color on it. It was blue or red or yellow or whatever, different colored tags. And every 2 hours, they would make an announcement. All ships have a public system, audio system, right, even then. And it says, this is the captain speaking or whatever. It is now time for yellow to return to their berth, and red can now go out for 2 hours. So you were only allowed outdoors onto a deck for 2 hours at a time, because there were so many troops, you couldn't put them all on deck. You tipped the ship over. Well, you wouldn't really, 20,000, because they put tanks and stuff. But anyhow, there was such a crowd. There was such a crowd that you didn't have meals. 20,000. The figure was 22,000, 20,000 Americans, and 2,000 assorted like me. I was one of the 2,000. But the next time I came on another ship, and I can't remember the name of it offhand. But when I came back the second time, I came on another ship, and that ship, the South Saskatchewan Regiment, the whole regiment was delegated for the culinary isn't the word, but for the food end, the cooking and the catering and distributing the food. And we even got fried eggs, and in England eggs were rationed like 2 eggs a month. We would get 2 eggs in a month, but I had some pull in the grocery store, and sometimes I'd bring 3 eggs home to be. And eggs were that scarce. It's hard to imagine. And yet, when we got on this ship to come back to Canada, the South Saskatchewan Regiment, which was roughly 1,000 people, bodies, soldiers, and these 1,000, they were responsible for feeding all the others on the ship. And going back on a ship, I don't remember the name of it or anything about it, but we had meals because it was coming from Canada, and of course there was lots of food. Well, when we went on the Elizabeth, the Elizabeth and the Queen Mary were fast, so it'd be 4 days. And I said when we got on boarded the ship, we got 4 days rations, K rations. They were American rations they were giving us, not British. So we got 4 days K rations, but food, it wasn't a problem. You never went hungry because the guys, when they were seasick, they couldn't eat anyhow, so, there was lots of food around. And of course all of us were used to eating, dog food as we called it. And in a day's ration, there was even chewing gum in the American ones. And cigarettes. My most horrible experience was on a ship, was on a P&O liner, that's Pacific and Orient, and it was an India ship, Pacific Orient, P&O liner, and it was a freighter, and we slept on the tables, we slept under the tables, and the main the main population of the ship was British, and we were fed cod, smoked, something like that, but it was a kind of a smoked fish. They sold it here too. B and I used to buy it here after, but they smoked that fish, and they fed us pills, malaria pills, that had a very, very bitter taste. And we used to have a kind of a game we were playing. I'll give you £1. Remember, a soldier, well, I made £1 a day subsistence pay at Acton, so you can imagine what £1 was worth. Okay, and out of that £1 a day, on top of my soldier's income, I kept B&U. That's what I got subsistence extra for not being in barracks. See, when I lived in Chiswick, I wasn't in barracks. So by not being in barracks, I got £1 a day. And that it was rated on Canadian money in our pay book as $4.45, and that was the exchange before the war. If you wanted a pound was worth $4.45 Canadian. So I got $4.45 in Canadian money, or £1 in English money, a day for not living in barracks. So what do you save not living in barracks? Heat, water, and food, right?
Yeah.
Subsistence, so that you can imagine. You see how the money values have changed. You think nothing of £1 today, right?
Yes.
And
right.
Then £1 to me was what I got not to live in barracks. And out of that I had to keep my wife and my children. So the £1 was worth a lot of money, And I remember buying bread and paying 1 farthing or half 2 farthings. And they would not give you a whole loaf. They cut a piece of loaf and gave it to you for a farthing. And I can distinctly remember the bakery where I used to go there, and when you're a Canadian soldier, people were always, what we call sack holding or boot polishing to something like a policeman or a Canadian soldier was always a little bit extra. And some British places, they spit on Americans things, but they didn't all the time as they did in the early days, because they realized that if it wasn't for the Americans, they'd be under Hitler control. Not all the Englishmen agreed to it at the time, and they still don't. But historians know that, thank God, that the Americans finally decided to say to Lindbergh, who flew the Atlantic Ocean on the St. Louis in 1927. He was the leader of the activists in the States that were anti-war to help the British, who flew across the ocean in 1927, and his child was kidnapped in the early 30s, and he was well known around the world, and he was the prominent #1 man in the States saying, in essence, let the fucking Englishmen fight their own wars. And as Archie Bunker in the All in the Family, that program says, well, the English are all faggots anyhow.